Okay. Episode 9 of Among the Thorns. Nice to have you here today. I've got kind of an unpleasant aspect. Not that I personally find any aspect of pornography to be terribly pleasant at this point, but the aspect that I want to discuss today is even worse. But I feel it is vital to understand the detestable nature of pornography for us to be able to mount an effective strategy against it. That's one of the steps that I would see within the mental realm of tactics. I was going to put this quote up. I didn't do it. But in C.S. Lewis, in Mere Christianity, which I highly recommend, I'm not as well read as I would like to be, but really, really good book. But he says at one point, before we can be cured, we must really want to be cured. But for many modern people, even the wish is difficult. It is easy to think that we want something when we do not really want it. Pornography can be especially difficult to resist if we see it as being a desirable thing. Now, we can hate porn with our minds and love it with our bodies, but if we love it with our minds and our bodies, and only our spirit, our faith, is left to contend against that addiction, I'm not saying that you can't be victorious, but you will be considerably weaker to it. So as a mental tactic, I think that we need to begin to understand how contemptible pornography is, not just to God, but also even to man. In the last episode, I did talk about the performers of it in a way that, broaches into the mental realm, because you're seeking to understand that on one hand, they are real people. They're not fake. Even if you're looking at cartoons or CGI pornography, it is still created by human hands. A person that is broken and being shaped by that sin. But anyway, where was I going with that? Oh, so, I talked about how you have to understand the humanity of the performers on one hand, and also, on the other hand, the fact that they are not to be admired. They are living in a great deal of sin, and that is to their detriment as well as ours. So this does kind of touch on the first one. But let's dig into it. So to begin, I want to kind of go not just in human trafficking, but I want to briefly discuss sex trafficking. So human trafficking on its own is massive, billions and billions of dollars a year. But then if you break it down from human trafficking to sex trafficking, it is still something that is vastly lucrative. We know that sex sells. We see that everywhere we go. And of course, that also applies to more shady markets throughout the world. I think it's important to note that while most of the countries in the world have made slavery illegal at this point, there are actually more, statistically, there are more slaves today than at the height of the Roman Empire, than at the height of the colonial slave trade. And so this is very much alive and kicking, unfortunately. In Revelation, actually, this is mentioned in Revelation 18, and this is verse 3, and then also down lower, 11 and 13 and onward. It reads, "For all the nations have fallen because of the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality." This is talking about Babylon the Great, that world system. "And the kings of the earth have committed acts of sexual immorality with her. And the merchants of the earth have become rich from the excessive wealth of her luxury. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn over her, because no one buys their cargo anymore. Cargo of gold, silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, and scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every article of ivory, and every article made from very valuable wood, bronze, iron, and marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, perfume, frankincense, wine, olive oil, fine flour, wheat, cattle, sheep, and cargo of horses, carriages, slaves, and human lives. In another translation, this is worded bodies. Bodies, that is, human slaves. Now, this is the fall of Babylon the Great, so the merchants of the world are weeping this because they made so much money off of the trade. But to mention at the end, bodies, human lives, that is what these things are built on. Now, of those, it is estimated, and of course, these numbers are only estimates because this is an underground industry. We don't have hard numbers for these things. However, in fact, when we see a stat, it's more than likely higher than the estimate. But estimates that 77% of women victims being trafficked, maybe I should say female, because it's not just women, it's girls, young boys, men as well. But this stat is talking about women. 77% being trafficked are for sexual exploitation. So again, there's more slaves at this point than at any point in human history. And when you break it down into the female category, the large, overwhelming majority are being trafficked for sex. Horrifying statistic. So how does that affect pornography, though? Because, that's talking about the sex slave trade. That's talking about sexual acts that are being forced on someone, coerced, manipulated into it, or straight up sold into that lifestyle. And of course, we like to think that the pornography we have seen is all based on consent. It's all based on, willing, active participants. And in our imagination, we like to think, oh, they're doing it because they're doing it for pleasure and so on and so forth. A lot of lies. The entire industry is fake. But I want to talk about three different ways, though, that the sex slave trade ties into pornography. That sexual trafficking affects pornography or is affected by pornography. So on one hand, it's kind of a simple economic thing, but in just watching pornography, you are contributing to a greater demand for pornography. And with greater demand comes greater exploitation. They see that there's money to be made there. There's plenty of people watching it, so they need to keep creating more content. And then there are those people that see, okay, I can get into this. I can exploit this. I can exploit someone else doing it. I can sell somebody else's body, and I can make money off of it, like a pimp. And this happens to a high degree. So there's that first hand, and you might say, well, I don't pay for it. I just go to these random tube sites and I look it up for free. So that doesn't affect me. But in fact, it still does, because one of the revenue models where pornography makes money, one is through subscription or selling the product. The other is through ad revenue on these sites. And so just by going to these sites, you are fueling that process. Now, number two, on top of that, you may have viewed victims of exploitation without knowing it. I hate that applies to me. I really do. I don't like that fact. I can't say, out of all of the pornography I have viewed in my lifetime, in the probably 20 years that I struggled with my addiction, that I did not see people that were being exploited against their will. Or being forced into doing something they didn't want to do, or worse. I don't like that fact, but it is a fact. It's not a small percentage. You cannot get exact statistics there, I don't think, again, because of the fact that it's illegal. But to our knowledge, this is not a very small amount where, oh, you probably haven't run into seeing someone. You very likely may have. There was a case just a couple years ago, maybe 2019. Yeah, where there was an underage girl that had been filmed that had been assaulted, and it ended up on one of the world's most popular pornography sites. I don't like to name the sites when I'm talking about the subject because honestly, even just the names of the sites themselves, if you have visited it or if it's a provocative name, can be a trigger. And it's bad enough that you are watching a video about pornography or talking about pornography because just thinking about it can elevate your lust. That's a risk that we have to take. But I don't want to unknowingly, trigger you with the name. So I'll just say it was a very popular one. But this girl had, she had gone missing. She had been abused. Later on, it had been estimated that about 58 different pornographic videos had been posted online. And she had to fight to get them taken down. This well-known site that likes to say, oh yeah, we don't have any of that content, would not take the videos down. Eventually they did, but horrifying to note that you may have seen videos like that. Now, third, on top of that, it's the simple fact that consent itself is tricky business, right? Now, it's well known within the porn industry. If you've watched videos of the actors or actresses that have left the industry, there's a lot of really good interviews on like Fight the New Drug or sites like that have these interviews. But it's well known that people are often manipulated, coerced into filming content that they didn't sign up for, that they have no desire to be a part of. There have, even worse than that, been cases where, many cases, this is actually one of the big ways that people get trafficked, that they get lied to. They say, okay, this is going to be a modeling gig. We want you to come out here to do this or this. They get there, and then they get manipulated into filming pornography. That was not what they were there for. Or worse than just manipulation, they get coerced into it by being drugged with illegal drugs or alcohol. They get doped up and then abused and filmed. Sometimes they don't even know it happened. And they just wake up and vomit after the fact. So heartbreaking, it really is. And so those three things, I think, are the main ways that sex trafficking is intrinsically linked to pornography. If you are watching pornography, you are fueling that. You are definitely a part of the problem. I would say that until Christ returns, sin will always be present. Exploitation will still be there. This slave trade will continue to rise. I don't like that, but that's more than likely true. As the love of many grows cold, these types of things are going to increase. But what an abomination. What a horrifying thought to realize that the men and women of the church are taking part in feeding Babylon the Great, as it were. That we are part of that problem. And it's bad enough that pornography is a cancer within the church. But that the church of Jesus Christ, the members of that, could feed this destructive thing. So, perhaps your body loves pornography. I mean, that's part of the things that I've talked about, the way that it ties into dopamine, and I will continue to do these topics on various angles. Your body is going to take longer to affect, unless God reaches down and just reshapes your mind, which I believe, God can do what he wants, and I would love for that to happen for you, but I know that didn't happen to me. Your body will continue to crave this for some time, perhaps the rest of your life. And your mind might still be struggling with seeing reasons why I should or should not consume it. This is one of those. Equip yourself with this knowledge the corruptive, repulsive nature of pornography. When you know that in your mind, you can begin to shift your mind from seeing it as something that you're like, I hate it, but I kind of love it, to no, I hate pornography. That's where we want to be. We want to be as repulsed by that sin as the Holy Spirit is. And I want to leave you with one quote on that note that I might have a, ooh, I do, look at that. And that is, to fall to temptation is not the same as living in temptation. A pig loves to wallow in filth. Don't be a pig. So don't be a pig. I know that if you're watching these videos, you unless you're watching them to better understand it because you have a spouse that's addicted to it or so on, that your body probably loves this. Just realize this was a little bit of a darker take on it today, I think, less encouraging. At the same time, you may fall, you will probably fall to this temptation at some point. I hope not. But just because you fall doesn't mean you need to then lay in the mud and enjoy it. Don't wallow in it. Thank you for watching another episode of Among the Thorns. I really appreciate every single viewer that I get because I'm so small of a channel that I just want so desperately to be of use to someone out there. And I thank you guys, and I'll hopefully see you next time.